Blessings, everyone. How are you? I hope everyone is doing well. This is Rev.Aphren with the Four Pillars Temple, and I'm coming to you today because I felt inspired to share a little something with you. I had the day off of work, and I decided that I was going to go on a little adventure today. So I took a little trip to Akron, which is about an hour from where I live, Akron, Ohio, and I went on a little adventure there, and I wanted to share a little bit with you about some of the things that I was thinking about. I went on a little walk and had some time to myself. Normally I'm not off work during the week, so it was nice to have that time alone and be able to kind of think about some things. And so it got me thinking about a lot, and so I just wanted to kind of come to you with some things that were coming up for me and some of my opinions about faith, spirituality, religion, things like that. And you know, it kind of dawned on me that for many of us, I should say pagans, because I don't know that the general population feels that they have the right to choose their faith, but obviously in the Wiccan and the pagan communities, we know that it's our right to choose our faith, and many of us have chosen our faith based upon our own insights, our own awareness, and the things that we appreciate in life, instead of following along with what other people have said. And so I was kind of just thinking about all these different religions and kind of what their kind of focus in life is, and maybe how that's different or the same to Wicca and paganism. And so I was thinking about religion, spirituality, and I was kind of pondering over, you know, what are the kind of the focus, what's sort of the aspirations in these different religions? Well, looking at Christianity, for example, because most of us are, you know, familiar with that. Most of us are familiar and understand that in Christianity, you know, we follow Jesus, who is the Christ, and in that we try to be Christ-like, and part of being Christ-like is doing all of these right things, having belief in God and in Jesus as the Savior, and doing what we can to help other people, right? So it's kind of this focus on belief, this focus on believing what's the right thing to believe, right? And helping people, right? So it's pretty simple, but it's very human-centric, anthropocentric, right? We look at something like Judaism, right? Judaism and Islam are kind of similar in that, right? The belief is you follow this law and you do what you're told, or you do what a good Muslim or a good Jew does, right? By following these laws, by observing halal or kosher practices, by living your life in a very specific way and following specific cultural and spiritual and religious guidelines, right? And so by doing that, you're living that spiritual life. It's not so much about what you do believe, it's more about how you behave, right? But again, it's also very centered on society, especially if you look at, like, you know, Judaism, the 613 mitzvot in the Old Testament, or in the Hebrew Bible, I should say, the Torah. You know, when you look across that, not every one of those mitzvot is for each person, right? Some of those mitzvot apply to you if you are of this demographic, or if you're of that demographic. So there is some variance there, but at the same time, it's all about what are these rules, what are these laws, and how do we set them up to have a civilized society, right? And then when you look at something like Buddhism, right? Buddhism is the focus is very much on internal and personal cultivation, right? To reach enlightenment. If you're focusing on the Mahayana tradition, which is largely what I focus on, the Mahayana tradition, it's all about how do you take the vow of the Bodhisattva, which is helping other people to reach enlightenment. So not only are you cultivating enlightenment within yourself, but you're also helping other people to become enlightened, or doing other things to gain merit for yourself and for other people so that you can become enlightened and then turn around and help them, right? Again, focus is very much person-centered, humanistic. And then when I think about things like Wicca and paganism, the focus shifts in a lot of ways, right? And I've written about this and I've talked about this a lot in some of my other writings, this idea that when we look across the lifespan of religion, or the lifespan of us as the species, human species, early religion, early spirituality was focused more on the natural environment, right? Which is very congruent with how Wiccans and pagans focus, right? But this idea that we focus on the natural environment, and so all these rituals and practices revolve around our relationship to nature, not so much to each other, right? But to nature. How do I live my life in a way that is going to allow me to follow with the rhythms of nature? How can I live my life so that I can observe the rhythms of nature? How can I live my life so that I can avoid danger or avoid catastrophe from natural occurrences and live in this way, right? And it wasn't until the end of, I guess you would say, the pagan era and the beginning of the monotheistic era that we start to see this shift, where it's no longer just about the environment and our place in it, but now it's about our environment and how we treat people, and sort of morality and ethics of engaging with and treating other people, right? And so as we start to shift, now we in modern paganism are in this place where we're kind of in the future, but we're looking back on the past. And so we're in this place where we have to admit that we have some Christian and monotheistic values in our society and culturally, at least in America, that we were raised with. But then on top of it, we're looking back on the past and we're looking, how can I recapture some of that, right? And so we're in this place where we're doing all of that. And so I think that for most Wiccans and pagans, our focus isn't so much on what can we do to help other people, or what can we do to be a better person ourselves, although that does come along with it, but it's more about how do we align ourselves with the natural rhythms of nature and live as part of nature, right? Again, I'm speaking from my perspective. You might not agree with this, and that's okay. But how do we live in, with the rhythms of the moon, with the rhythms of the sun, with the rhythms of the seasons, with the rhythms of the weather, with the day, with the time of day, right? All of this stuff that we're really kind of bringing into our lives as we focus on magic and ritual, as we focus on devotional work. And as people start to move forward and start to develop a spiritual belief and understanding, especially about the gods, it's really when we have the opportunity to kind of reflect on what do the gods mean to us and how do we relate to the gods. Now, again, I've also spoken and written about this in the past, the topic of panentheism, right? So the idea of panentheism, which is related to what we're talking about, is this belief that God does not simply exist in the world, right? God is not just the plants and the trees and the animals, right? But God is also not just this spiritual divinity that lives somewhere out there, right? And that kind of puppeteers the physical world, right? God is both. In panentheism, we believe that God is both. God is the creator, the thing that creates and animates the universe, but God is also the creation. God is that physical world, right? The plants and the animals and the trees and the rocks and the rivers and the lakes, all of that stuff is spiritual and has its own spirit, right? But at the same time, God also, or the divinity, also lives outside of the system and lives out there somewhere too. So it's both, right? And so in modern Wicca, that's generally how we approach this idea in one form or another. Now, I would also say that we view divinity more so in abstract and forms, a kind of thought forms, versus as hard, concrete things, right? And so the way that I see the divine is very much like a portal, right? When you take a particular god or goddess with a particular story and a particular image and a particular iconography or symbolism, that acts as a sort of portal, a sort of gateway for you to move from where you are and move into the spiritual realm of things, right? That's kind of your gateway in. Now, we also believe that that one face or image or shape of the divine is not all that there is. And I would say that for me, as a Wiccan, as a devout Wiccan, as someone who's practiced since the early 2000s, I would say that for me, I'm trying to reclaim or kind of pull back from this current mainstream pop Wicca, where people seem to, I guess I wouldn't say Wicca, mainstream pop witchcraft, where people are separating witchcraft from Wicca, from the essence and the spirituality that is our faith, which is Wicca. And they're using our tools, I wouldn't say our, I don't own it, they're using tools, the tools and correspondences and divinities as tools, as objects to be used in spiritual practice, right? So it's like, well, you know, I want to do magic for civil unrest, I guess I'll invoke Zeus. Or I want to do magic for protection, I'll invoke this deity or that, right? And so here in the Four Pillars Temple, you know, our focus is on devotion first and foremost. How do we create a personal relationship with the gods? And how do we do it in a way that I'm going to be able to honor the gods within me, and honor the gods out there, right? And again, these images, these faces, these thought forms of the gods are our way in. But we have to understand too that that energy is all the same energy. That energy lives inside of us, that energy lives outside of us. And so when we get to a point in our practice, when we start practicing devotional work, we get to a place where we have the opportunity to reflect that inward back onto ourselves. Here at the Four Pillars Temple, we have recently started adding a mirror to our altar. And that mirror represents many things, but the mirror also represents that divinity that's within us, that reflection of the divine that's within us, as the divine is reflecting back on us. And so this idea that when we begin to work our devotional practices and our spiritual practices separate from the magical or the non-religious practices, secular practices, we have the opportunity to find that connection within us. And the things that we do outwardly are meant to instill and create and connect and reconnect us with the internal peace that's going on inside of us. And so a lot of people have asked about the idea of patrons. And a lot of people have said, well, you know, how do I get a patron? Or how does a patron come to me? Or, you know, does it matter if I have a patron? Should I have a patron, right? And after, you know, all the time that I've practiced and all of the different religions that I've researched and studied and explored their practices, I notice that, you know, having a patron says more about us as a person than it does about the gods themselves, right? Because whatever doorway we choose to enter in order to connect with the divine doesn't really matter. It's the fact that we have the doorway, though. That's the important piece, right? And so for some of us, that doorway is through a particular deity, right? For some of us, it's not. And so for a long time in my practice, I kind of avoided having a patron, because I really felt like, what's the point of having a patron when I have the gun goddess and everything works fine? But as I've gotten further along in my practice, it's not so much about trying to keep my practice pure and unadulterated. It's about, how do I make my practice my practice? How do I turn it into something that is unique to me, that resonates with me? And that patron that I have is an outward expression of my internal longing or yearning to be that thing, right? And so our patron can be so many things for us. It can be the externalization of our internal potential. It could be the motivation that we need to make, you know, to go forward with our lives and to make those changes that we need to make. It can be the externalization of that thing that helps us to dig deep into our own strength that we know is there. You know, all of these things we use a patron for, right? And it's important, I think, for us to recognize what that is, right? And for a long time, I didn't have a patron. And for many of you who follow our channel, you know that my patron now is Kuan Yin, right? Kuan Yin. And Kuan Yin is the bodhisattva of compassion, the goddess of mercy and compassion. She's also Kuan Yin, or Kuan Shi Yin, is the Chinese version of Avalokiteshvara, which is the Sanskrit name for one who hears the cries of the world. And so Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, there are many other names, is this savior-like being that hears the cries of the world, and with the many arms that she has, she can reach for and save anyone who's calling for her. And finding myself working in mental health and addiction treatment as a provider, I really lean on Kuan Yin and the essence and the meaning behind Kuan Yin. Do I externalize her? Sometimes, right? Do I internalize her? Sometimes, right? It just depends on what I feel like I need at that moment. If I feel like I need to call on my own compassion and my own motivation for being a compassionate and caring person, then yeah, I'll internalize. If I want to honor that compassion and my capacity for compassion, I externalize, right? And that can be different for anybody, right? I wouldn't necessarily call Kuan Yin a pagan deity, but I wouldn't necessarily not call her a pagan deity, right? And then we have someone like Isis, right? Who, again, this mothering figure, this nurturing figure, the goddess of 10,000 names, right? She can be whatever you want her to be. Just like Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin, in the Lotus Sutra, it is said that Avalokiteshvara can be whatever people need them to be in order to help and save them, right? They could be the old woman on the street who needs help crossing the street, and we dig deep into our compassion to help her, and then we feel that compassion, right? Or maybe it could be a really difficult boss that maybe encourages us to have compassion toward ourselves and be like, okay, listen, his expectations are incredibly high, and I can't do this without having a little compassion for myself and knowing when to draw the line and set boundaries, right? All of that is so important. Whether you whatever patron you choose. But I really think, as I'm getting older in my practice, and I think getting older in my life, I'm starting to notice the importance of having a continued importance of having a personal devotional practice. And there are just so many pieces and layers that go to this that I'm still learning about. And that's one thing here at the temple that we really have always been about, is what can you do to develop that spiritual devotional practice, and how can you really dig deep in yourself and find that, right? And for some people, it's finding a deity that resonates with your need for protection or for your need for strength. Maybe it's resonating or protection and safety, right? Or maybe it's finding a deity that resonates with your love for nature, or the raw frivolity of nature and the beauty of nature, right? Kuan Yin is my personal patron, but our temple's patron is Gaia, the goddess of the earth. And we approach Gaia not so much as the Greek Gaia, but as sort of that totalitarian Gaia image of the mother goddess, right? And representing the earth and our relationship to the earth, right? It can be anything that you need it to be. And so, I've shared on these things before, but having, my experience that I did today when I was out on my walk, and kind of just reflecting on what is our focus in our practice as pagans, as Wiccans. What is our focus? Is it to be connected with the earth and to follow along in the rhythms and the cycles of nature and be part of the cycle? Is it to separate ourselves from the cycle and say we're not an animal? I'm a more sophisticated thing, and so I am more focused on more sophisticated endeavors like civil involvement and interactions with other humans, and that's where my focus is on human interaction. You know, where is your focus? Is your focus on cultivating your own personal enlightenment or liberation from this life, or is it integrating yourself more into this, using you know, the experiences of this life as your own motivation and liberation, right? So all of these experiences we can use in our own way to help support us in our spiritual practice, in our devotional work. And that is always and ever will be the focus of the Four Pillars Temple. The importance of devotional work cannot be understated. And a lot of times it is done alone, and that's okay. When I practice holidays with the temple, I try to bring that sense and that energy of devotion into our ritual as well. So it can be done in the group setting. But, you know, I just wanted to encourage you and challenge each of you to think about what is your focus in your practice. And if you can, comment below and let me know what you think it is and how you are working to cultivate that in your own personal practice. So I hope that this video was helpful for someone. I feel like it was really helpful for me to kind of process through some of the things I was thinking about from this morning. So I thank you all for watching, and until next time, signing off for now.